Welcome everyone to our session, Mixing Sources, Amplifying Voices, Crafting Writing in an Information Age. I'm Troy Hicks, and I'm really happy to be a part of the Reinventing the Classroom virtual conference. It seems like we've got quite a few people joining in from a variety of different places, and we're going to give you a moment here in just a moment to look at the map and identify where you're at. We're having a great little chat conversation about the weather. I'm here in Michigan right now with some gray skies and almost, I wouldn't say it's quite snowing, but it's certainly a little chilly for this time of what is now May, believe it or not. And everyone should be able to get in and configure your audio settings and those types of things. We have Peggy George here acting as a facilitator and helper, so if I can't get to your question or comment or something like that, you can also send a message to Peggy. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and advance to our next slide, where we are going to thank our sponsors, ClassFlow, Blackboard Collaborate, and the Learning Revolution Project. And of course, you could find information about all of those sponsors on the Reinventing the Classroom social network. So with that in mind, I think what we are going to do now is enable the whiteboard permissions for everyone. I'm just going to double check and make sure that I know how to do that. I'm pretty familiar. It looks like, oh, someone's already done that. Thanks so much. So yeah, you guys all know what to do. You're already putting your little dots on the map there. Click on the pointer button and show us where you're at. We've got quite a few people from across the U.S. Wondering if there's anyone else outside of the U.S. joining us right now. We can see if we've got any pointing and doing that kind of stuff. Oh, looks like we've got someone highlighting down in perhaps Georgia or Alabama, Mississippi, somewhere in that direction where things are looking probably a little warmer than they here up in Michigan. 80 degrees and sunny in Seattle. Wow, amazing. So, all right, well, we're so glad that you could all join us. And of course, for those of you who are eventually going to be watching this as an archived recording, I appreciate you taking the time to do that as well. So I'm going to advance the slide here. And again, this is Mixing Sources, Amplifying Voices, Crafting Writing in an Information Age. I have a very few slides that I'd like to go through and do some talking at you, but I would also, to the extent as possible, like to talk with you. And the main feature for today is that we're going to be looking at a piece of writing, a digital piece of writing, and talking about how it was composed and how we can use the lenses of author's craft to think very carefully about what we're asking our students to do. Certainly we have access to Prezi and Blogster and social networks and wikis and blogs and podcasting and digital stories, all these types of things, many of which have been around, believe it or not, for quite some time now, going on, who knows, 10, 15 years. But the one thing that I try to do in all of my work and across all of my thinking is get in the idea of writing involved. And so that's what we're going to center on. I'm a writing teacher by trade and a geek at heart, and so I combine those two passions into the work that I do with teachers and with students. So a couple quick things about me. Of course, I am Troy Hicks, as you've already found out. My Twitter handle, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to manage Twitter and the Blackboard Collaborate session here. I'll try to peek on Twitter if anyone sends that out, message that way. But my Twitter is Hickstro. I am also hickstro@gmail.com. Believe it or not, I do actually like getting emails from people, and I'm always willing to answer and reply and think about what you're doing in your classrooms. So please do feel free to email me if you do have questions or thoughts or ideas or student work you'd like to share. And Peggy was so kind as to already put the link to my wiki back onto the chat. So we will be working from a page off the wiki. If you go to the home page directly, there should be a link right near the top for Reinventing the Classroom, or you can go to that URL that will take you directly to the presentation page. And I always like including this little avatar of me. This is made by one of my children for the Wii. So this is how my children view me, and I always think it's interesting to think about their literacies, both their print literacies and their visual literacies, and see what they're able to do. So it's always interesting to get a reflection of yourself from a slightly different perspective, and so I really like that avatar. All right, well, just a little bit of background. I kind of always feel like this is the brag slide, and I try not to do that. So I'm basically just going to say that I've written a few books, or co-authored a few books. Most recently, down in the bottom right-hand corner, Create, Compose, Connect, just came out in March with a friend and colleague from the Chippewa River Writing Project at Central Michigan University. His name's Jeremy Heiler. He's a middle school teacher. And he and I worked together to describe what was going on in his classroom over the course of the years. He was trying to do two things. One was to integrate the Common Core standards, and the other was to integrate one-to-one laptop technology in the middle school. So the book we're going to be talking about mostly today, though, will be the one over on the bottom left-hand side, and that is my last Heinemann title called Crafting Digital Writing, Composing Text Across Media and Genres. And so a little bit about crafting digital writing. One of the things that I was really interested in once I began writing and thinking about teacher education and what I could do to help in professional development, one of the things I began thinking about was, how can we use the language that teachers, for the most part, know and understand about writing? And by that I mean we've had a number of great scholars, teacher researchers, and educational consultants, people who have been thinking about writing for a long, long time, stretching back to Donald Graves and Donald Murray, but more recently people like Barry Lane, Jim Burke, Penny Kittle, Ralph Fletcher, Nancy Atwell, Lucy Calkins, others I'm sure I'm forgetting, Katie Wood-Ray, a whole bunch of people that have been thinking in smart ways about the craft of writing, looking at what it is that writers actually do, almost at the word and sentence level, and certainly at the level of like an essay or a story. How do they organize things? How do they express their ideas? What are the techniques that they use to draw in their audience? And how do they write in different genres? And so one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this book was, how can we take that idea of craft and think about it from the perspective of digital text? So I want to start by sharing a couple of resources with you. So of course, you've got the link to the page, and Peggy is doing a great job adding some other links to the books and stuff like that. Here is a link to my Crafting Digital Writing page. So if you go to that wiki page, you're going to be able to see all the resources from the book. You can see all the student examples, and I also have some resources specifically that I'd like to share with you about craft. So the first one, I'm going to try the web tour here. I'm launching it. We're going to see what, or no, I'm not doing the web tour. I'm doing application sharing. See, I remembered. I knew what I had to do. So I'm going to do some application sharing. Hopefully on your screen now, you are able to see this PDF. Now, there's a link to it right on that Crafting Digital Writing wiki page. It's the one that says Authors Craft. And I'll put a link into it right there, so that if you can't get it from the viewing, you got it that way. So this table was my attempt to take all those great authors and thinkers and writers and put it all into one place. Now, of course, you'll see my nod to the Common Core there with the genres of the narrative, informational, and argumentative text. But you'll also see at the bottom some strategies and some other ways that authors employ craft. And I also included visuals. Katie Wood-Ray has a great book called In Pictures and in Words, and then Steve Moline has a book called I See What You Mean, which I think is in its second edition. And so I used some of their tips and strategies as well and added them to this table. Now, the idea, again, is that we as teachers of writing can help students make these very intentional moods if we show them how to do it. If we look at mentor text and if we say, hey, let's talk about how this character is developed. Hey, let's look at the way that this author uses dialogue and so forth. Uh-oh, someone just said that the stream froze. I'm going to try to turn off my application sharing, and hopefully that will bring us back to normal. At least I'm hoping it will bring us back to normal. So hopefully you're seeing okay. Yep. All right. Well, Peggy, let me know. It sounds like you can still hear me and things are going all right. So, okay. So anyway, the author's craft piece is one important element of it. The other important element of it, and again, this is a link off of the wiki page, and I'll also put the link right here into the chat room, is that I wanted to think about digital craft. What are the things that authors of digital text do and have to consider that are a little bit different and may require us to think a little more carefully about the moves that we are making? And so here you'll see some things about website design, employing audio, using presentations, employing video. What are the types of things that we want to add in to develop these digital texts? And so if you look at that list, what you'll be able to see is that I've got a whole number of techniques that are used, from website design, using typography, layout, color schemes, and organizations. Those things all apply to presentations, which also include things like slide transitions and animations, including graphs and charts and other data. Audio text can include things like speakers' voices or narrators' voices, as well as sound effects and music. And then, of course, video, then you have a whole number of techniques that we've learned from film about camera angle, framing, the gaze, panning, zooming, and techniques like using interviews, archival footage, and so forth. So what I'm trying to do here is basically say there's a whole lot of things to consider when we think about all of the different ways we look at author's craft. Now, I think I've gone back to just the slideshow, and I'm not trying to do application sharing right now. Is everybody able to see that? And if I click, I'm going to, yep, hopefully we're back on the slideshow. Good. All right, so one of the things I'd like to do is think a bit for just a moment about some of these types of texts. And the one type of text that I want you to think about are presentations. And I'm sure you can help me here by thinking about all the ways in which presentations could go wrong for kids. and by that I mean that, you know, what happens when we have kids move into something that's a little more, say, PowerPointless instead of PowerPoint, or the fact that we've got all kinds of different things that can happen with Prezi and seasickness and who knows what else. So I put up a blank screen here, and hopefully this is going to all work for you. I'm going to say, what are some of our concerns about the way that students, and I'm going to use this language again, craft, or for sake of thinking about it in another way, compose. So what are some of the concerns about the way that students craft or compose presentations? What are some things, questions that you might have, concerns that it raises for you, things that you're thinking about or worrying about when you're having students do that? So put that on the top. I'll put it in red and hopefully in bold, and hopefully you're able to see that okay. And I think we've enabled whiteboard permissions. Go ahead and jot some thoughts in here. Not seeing the blank screen yet. Okay, oh, it's on a private page. I wanted to go on the work area. I'm sorry. I make this page public. I thought this would automatically do that. Yep, how about we just do it right on that slide? Go go ahead and do it right on that slide. My apologies. Go ahead and do it right on that slide where I have all that stuff about web-based text and presentation. So what are the concerns that you have when students craft or compose presentations? So feel free to add them there. Go ahead and also perhaps put them in the chat room if you would like, if you're feeling so inclined. And hopefully you can see my question right there across the top now. I'm not sure. I think we've enabled the permissions for people to type, but perhaps not. Anyone having trouble finding the tool for typing? It's on the toolbar there, there's the letter A, and I'm clicking the big A to create a text label as compared to just putting text on the page. Yep. Oh, okay. I'm seeing a couple things at the bottom. Thanks, Peggy, for pointing that out. I have my toolbar right over top of what someone just typed. So I'm concerned about use of copyrighted images, school ABP policies. Sometimes they can use too many words. There's that constant balance between appropriate use of words and images. Other things, and feel free to put them in the chat room too if you're feeling like the whiteboard is not appropriate for you to type on. Plagiarism can be a concern. Yeah, and to the extent that we're able, I'll talk about some of these bigger ticket items, things about copyright and plagiarism. I'll try to do that as we move through the examples, and if I'm not quite getting to those questions by the end, then certainly bring them up for me again, and I'm hoping Peggy will keep me honest with that as well. The time available for both writing in and out of school is certainly a challenge. All right, well, thank you for adding those thoughts and ideas. I'm going to stay on this slide for just a moment more, and I'm going to say that I understand. I can certainly relate to the idea, even working with my own children, and I've spent quite a bit of time in classrooms and schools with colleagues this year. And what I've found is that even when we think we've got kids in a scenario where, oh, they can access a Google Drive here at school as well as at home, or they can get on Prezi or things like that, that doesn't always in and of itself ensure that they're going to do the work and do high quality work. So what I hope to show you in the example of a presentation that my daughter did is how we can help scaffold that kind of high quality work. All right, well, let me go ahead and advance and move forward. The idea that we want to craft and compose and use our time and energy thoughtfully to help kids make digital writing kind of connects to another big idea and a big thinker in education. Many of you probably know this person right here, and if you don't, you're about to. Of course, this is Ken Robinson, probably most famous for some of the TED Talks that he has done related to education and creativity. And I was reading his book, Out of Our Minds, and ran across this quote, and this really helped guide me as I was writing my book as well. And I think it's going to help us think about the ways that we can support and scaffold kids in the process of digital writing. So what Ken Robinson says is this: being creative involves doing something. It would be odd to describe as creative someone who never did anything. To call somebody creative suggests that they are actively producing something in a deliberate way. So what I really like here are these ideas. The idea of doing something and the idea of actively producing, as well as this adjective here, this description, this deliberate way. So we want to have kids not just sign on to Prezi or sign on to Gloucester or sign on to PowerPoint or whatever they happen to be using to begin crafting their digital writing with the idea that, oh, I can just get on here and put things, but things should have some kind of order and organization. There should be a central idea. In some ways, everything's an argument, as the title of Andrea Lunsford's book goes. And so Ken Robinson helps remind me that we want to help kids be deliberate in their creativity. So that's what I hope you're about to see in some of these examples. All right, one more tool for you to think about before we jump in and look at the student work. This is a tool that I first learned when I was working at the Michigan State Writing Center as an undergraduate and carried with me and adapted over the years. It's called MAPS. And MAPS is kind of a rhetorical tool, a heuristic, a problem-solving device. It's a way to help us think about kids, or to think about, not kids, but to think about writing in a way that frames the audience and the purpose, the situation, as well as the mode and media. And by mode here, I'm using that synonymous with genre. So we're thinking about different genres. We're thinking about the expectations of those genres. What does it mean to write a narrative as compared to an argument, as compared to an informational piece, to use the Common Core language. We're also trying to separate, to some extent, the difference between mode and media. So for instance, you could tell your students, I'd like you to create a podcast. That's the technology and the media that you're employing to create a text. That's not necessarily a good description of the mode. The idea is that you want to make it much more clear, okay, we're thinking about this particular genre. And if you go back to those charts that I just shared a few moments ago, those techniques and characteristics of the genre will help make it more clear for students what to do, and you can also look at mentor texts. The other thing I would like to point out here, I should probably be thinking about mean and median as well, Peggy, but I'm not a math guy, unfortunately. The other thing that I'd like to point out here with maps is that with digital writing, we have an opportunity to share with audiences beyond the school. And I say intended and incidental, because intended, of course, kids are writing to earn a grade and to fulfill the requirements of a project, but incidental in the sense that they can potentially be seen by a worldwide audience. And that is something that's very important for you as a teacher, and especially for them as writers. And also the purpose. Of course, we need to meet standard 1.2.5, but we can also think more broadly. Are you trying, not only are you trying to argue, are you trying to persuade? Are you trying to berate? Are you trying to coax? Are you trying to do what? So thinking about the specific verb that we're using when we think about the action we're trying to have the writer do. So those are some things to keep in mind. And of course, every writing situation is different, and the amount of time you have in your classroom is different, and whether you have computers and so forth are different. But hopefully this heuristic gives you something to think about when you're framing your assignments and talking with your students about writing. Okay, so let's talk about one particular mode of writing, and let's think about this idea of book reports. Now, I can't hear you groaning in the background. Nobody turned on their microphone. I'm not sure if book reports in and of itself elicits, oh, there's a frowny face that just appeared in the chat room. So I can certainly understand that. Yes, so I'm sure you felt in many ways like Diana Mitchell did here in her article, 50 Alternatives to the Book Report, which she wrote in 1998, by the way, and is still quite relevant today, especially as we come up with new digital tools. But anyway, what she says is that students tire of responding to novels in the same ways. They want new ways to think about a piece of literature and new ways to dig into it. And I think that's just as true now as it was in 1998. And one of the things that I'd like to think about with you is how we can do that. So yes, it's great, Troy. We want to use all these tools, but we have to be purposeful. What is it that we can do? How can we do it? So on and so forth. Well, we're going to take a look at a model, and we are going to look at a digital book report that I worked on with my daughter, or actually I should probably reorganize that and say my daughter worked on with a little bit of help from me, because even though, yes, Dad's a writer and a teacher and someone who does a whole lot with digital literacies, most of this work is hers. I'll point out the very specific moves that I helped her think, but you're going to hear a lot from her as you think about what she's done. And so I want, before we watch a quick video about this, I'd like to pause and say, what goals do we have for students as readers, writers, and thinkers? And again, this is not just like the Common Core type stuff or any particular set of standards. This is, who do we want our writers to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? Who do we want our readers to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? We're asking big questions, not just about completing one assignment, but about the types of stance that we have our readers and writers take. And yes, certainly, I think we want them to love reading and love writing. And then also, how can we reimagine the genre or the mode of the book report to meet a number of literacy goals through digital writing? So what I'd like to do is introduce you to my daughter, Lexi. Now, there's a YouTube video as well as a link to her Blogster. I am going to put the link to the YouTube video in here, and I'm also going to try to do this through a web tour, so I know roughly how long the video is going. It's about, I don't know, I think it's roughly 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes. I'm looking at it again. So if for some reason it's not working for you through Blackboard Collaborate, you can click on that link, and then I'm also going to launch it here through the web tour. And I'd really like you to continue thinking about these things. What are the bigger goals that we have? How can we imagine the book report? So let me try to do this. I'm going to open up the web application sharing, paste in this YouTube link, and hopefully you're going to be able to hear and watch this. And again, if you can't, go ahead, I'm going to pause it for just 1 second. If you can't, for some reason, go ahead and launch it on your own, and I will come back in about 6 minutes. Feel free to add thoughts and comments in the chat as the video is playing.
Oh, there it is. My funny, but James Patterson. Okay. This is my funny. It's comedy. Some parts are kind of sad. His name's Jamie, and he's in a
All right, so Peggy's asked everyone just to give us a green check mark when you're done watching, and I'll kind of fill some of the space here with our audio interlude, just by saying that the one particular element that I encouraged Lexi to think about was the video. And after I pretty much said, because she was looking to put a video from YouTube on there, and I said, why don't you go ahead and put your own video on there? Boom. She and her brother went and did the green screen thing. So that was that. The other thing is that she was spending quite a bit of time online looking for pictures from the book. So you'll notice those 3 pictures of the characters. She actually took those with her iPhone and imported them. So again, that was an issue of copyright and fair use, which we can talk about in a minute. But as I'm hoping some of you are finishing up and having a chance to kind of digest everything that Lexi said in the video there. Welcome from Austria. As we're finishing up the video, what thoughts or questions or ideas do you have? If you want to raise your hand, we can turn over the microphone for just a moment. You're also certainly more than welcome to put comments in the chat room. Just interested in your reaction to the way that Lexi described her composing process and all the elements of craft that she put into designing her Blogster project. And Peggy, I really appreciate all the thoughts that you're sharing there. Do you want to take the mic for a moment and offer a quick response?
Sure, I'll do that. I know people are often shy about taking the mic, but I was so impressed with that video. And it was clear to me that she wasn't just thinking about herself and her project, but she had some things she really wanted to share with people, and she wanted to make it really interesting for them. I love that comment that she made about leaving people wanting to read the book. Please don't end. And I think that's an awesome goal for someone who's sharing something they've read or something they've written even. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate that, and I know she'll appreciate it as well. Other thoughts from any of our other participants? Anyone want to take the mic? My own students tell me that sometimes I have an unnatural ability for wait time, and I do that even more so in the webinar just to make sure that I haven't overlooked anyone. Okay, well, no problem. If you do have a comment or a thought or a question, certainly go ahead and put it in the chat. And also, if you raise your hand to signal, Peggy is doing a great job with the moderating and will certainly welcome you into the conversation. So what I'm hoping you've seen with this particular project and the way that Lexi went about composing it is that she did have that initial template from Blogster, which was in some ways kind of nice. You know, it's a creative constraint in some ways. Like we have to give them, we have to give students just enough so that they have something to work with, and yet at the same time, she was able to really adapt and change what she needs to change to get her message across. So if we go back a couple slides just for a moment, I'm going to look again at the maps and think about what was going on for Lexi in that piece. So with the mode, she certainly took the genre of the book report and she acknowledged the things that she needed to do in terms of recognizing the characters and telling a little bit about the plot and so forth. But then she also was able to use media very effectively. She combined words and images and video into one cohesive text. Peggy just acknowledged the point about the audience and the purpose. And then the interesting thing with the situation for Lexi, and again, I recognize this is not the same for everyone. And, you know, as a student in a middle-class family from America, she fortunately has the access to technology both inside and outside of school to do these types of projects. So we'd have to think about what could we expect from our students in terms of the access that they have. Question here, do we use maps to help them think about their writing? I certainly do. I have a colleague who I'm working with right now, actually, Dawn Reed. She's a high school teacher. I know that she uses maps to frame assignments for her students. Jeremy and I, in our Create, Compose, Connect book, he uses maps as well. So yes, it's definitely something that and when I teach pre-service teachers, I teach them maps too. So it is definitely a tool that I use in a variety of contexts. So, all right, so book reports, lots of different options, and I really would encourage you to check out that Diana Mitchell article because she's got a ton of different ideas there. And now if we could think about them and bring them in to the digital age, you know, for instance, I'm just going to read a couple of them, you know, like obviously, you know, a collage or introducing your character as a superhero, creating the backstory or childhood for a character. How great would that be to make like a documentary film, iMovie or something, a talk show, a radio exchange. You know, these are things that we can definitely do in podcasting and video making and so forth. Even in 1998, she said create a homepage, right as the internet was just starting to get into schools, and so that's something that we could go back and look at now. But there are 50 ideas in that article, all of which I think can be adapted really well to different things that we can do now with the technology that we have. Let me go ahead and advance forward. This is another big idea, kind of big thinker, Cathy Davidson, who gives us a little bit of perspective on where we're at thinking about school, and especially with the theme of reinventing the classroom. And then I'm gonna share this. I'll share a few other resources and then open it up for questions. So Cathy Davidson, she is the professor, one of the professors at Duke, who, you know, about 10 or 12 years ago when Duke started handing iPods to their students, she was one of the people that was in charge of that, and everyone was like, oh, what are students going to do with iPods, and how is this going to work, and isn't that great? And well, now we have things like podcasting and video casting and iTunes U and massively open online courses and all those kinds of things. So we never quite know where these little tiny innovations are going to go, and I think that's inspiring for all of us to think about in our classroom, that we might be able to do something seemingly quite small, but that it could turn into something much broader and more influential than we ever imagined. So at any rate, Cathy Davidson here, she says, we're so busy attending the multitasking, information overload, or children's security online, or just learning the new software program and trying to figure out if we can really live without Twitter or Foursquare, that we haven't rethought the institutions that should be preparing for more changes ahead. And as you can see, I've highlighted that idea, rethinking the institutions, which again, certainly connects to the theme of the conference, but I hope also connects to this idea of how to understand and use digital tools for writing. So again, to me, it's just the slight pivot that we have to make. It's the difference between telling our students, oh, you're going to make a Glogster, as compared to, oh, let's think about your audience and purpose, and maybe you end up having them use Glogster anyway, but you lead them through that process by thinking about writing and thinking about what they're going to say to a particular audience and how that message can be shared. So that's the one thing I'd like to share. Another thing that I would like to share really quickly, and I'll try the web tour. I'll put the link into the chat room as well, is a website from the National Writing Project, and it is called Digital Is. Digital Is a website, a collection of resources that teachers from all around the country have been composing and adding to over the course of probably about 4 or 5 years now. And the neat thing about Digital Is, for me, is that it's not so much a how-to series type of lessons. Do this, do that, go ahead and here's how you step-by-step use Google Docs. Digital is instead more of a why to. Why should I do this? How do I do this? How do I introduce these ideas to my students? What can I say? What can I do to introduce this tool as a thinking mechanism, as a way to compose something using these digital affordances that we have, but still making sure that we stay true to the idea of writing and thinking and creativity without getting caught up in the bells and whistles. So I just wanted to make that one available for everyone to see. So, all right. So I'm going to turn off Web Tour. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not available on the iPad. I do apologize. I'm just going to go back to Whiteboard here. And I think, let me see, I think I put my contact info back up there. So there we go. I'm going to leave that up there. If you have questions and you would like to type them onto the slide, feel free to do so. I'm also looking into the chat right now and seeing if there's anything that has come up in terms of a question. I might be able to see, I'm just kind of scrolling back really quickly while I'm talking. Maybe Peggy, since you've been so great at moderating and I know you're engaged with all of this work, do you, oh, you do. I scroll back down and there's the question there. So how do I get teachers to incorporate more technology with student writing? Well, one thing that I would keep in mind is that, and I think maybe I can probably turn on the video now because I'm not trying to do anything else. That way you can see me and talk to me and see there's some of my kids' stuff right there, the analog stuff back on the wall. But how do I help teachers? So there's a couple ways that I like to think about doing this. The first way, of course, is that I just ask them, what are you doing? What are you hoping to accomplish? How are you working with your kids right now? And again, depending on the school, depending on the context, you may be in a classroom where kids do have laptop access, or you may not. You may be in a classroom where they have Wi-Fi throughout the school. You may not. So the question becomes, okay, what can we do in the time that we have to support your goals? For instance, I was talking a little bit earlier about my colleague Dawn. We were in her classroom just today, as a matter of fact, and before the kids could even open up the laptop, she was passing out a piece of paper, and she said, I don't want you logging in. I don't want you doing anything. I have a question for you. We need to capture your first draft thinking. And she posed the question, which framed the lesson for the day, and the kids were writing it down on paper, like on top of the laptops, which would have made a great picture. I should have captured that. But I think that sometimes to help teachers, we have to get away from the idea that everything needs to be big and amazing and powerful and wonderful right off the bat. We can take small steps. We can also help kids think about things, sequentially. Like, let's work on it a little bit now, a little bit more later, or let's try something now. So maybe you do introduce them to Glogster, for instance, and then you bring in that idea of, okay, so you found a video on YouTube last time. This time we're going to make a video and we're going to incorporate that. And you could use something like WeVideo or Animoto or some of those other types of things. So I really do try to talk with teachers about what they're trying to do. Are you trying to get kids just to write more, like quite literally build their fluency and their stamina with writing? Maybe you want to try text-to-speech, help them get their initial ideas down without having to you know, yes, they do have to learn keyboarding still, but at least for some kids, that's a real hurdle. And if they do text-to-speech, they can get some ideas down to get started. Or are you trying to have them create a more multimodal composition? So those are a couple things to kind of think about. Someone asked earlier about copyright, and I think a very closely related topic to copyright is plagiarism. I am not a lawyer, and I'm probably not the expert on copyright, but the person who is an expert, and I don't think she's a lawyer actually technically either, but she's worked with lawyers, is Renee Hobbs, who is currently a professor at University of Rhode Island. She wrote a book a few years ago called Copyright Confusion, How Fair Use Supports Digital Learning. I just put a link in the chat room to her wiki. And what they have on that wiki is a very useful tool. She and some of her teacher colleagues put this tool together. It's called a reasoning guide for fair use. So it kind of looks like a worksheet, basically, and yet you want to use that guide as a way for kids to think through the process. What is it that I want to use in terms of the copyrighted material? And then it goes through that process of talking about the pillars of fair use. The Media Education Lab website, that's kind of the more official homepage that contains a number of Renee's projects. Sorry, I'm typing and grabbing links and talking all at the same time. The Media Education Lab is another great resource, and you can visit their copyright section. And they've got videos, they've got lesson plans, they've got a whole number of ideas. Yes, it was Kristen Hokinson. Thanks, Peggy. I knew I couldn't remember her name. Thank you so much for putting that in there. So that's where I go to copyright. The other thing with fair use and copyright, the way I've heard Renee explain this is that fair use and copyright is a legal question. The academic and ethical question is about plagiarism and citing your sources. So while it's appropriate legally to take someone else's work and remix it and incorporate it into your own work, you might want to think a little bit more academically about why you're doing that. So for instance, if you're taking a film clip or if you're using an image from a website or something like that, not only are you transforming it, which is the copyright purpose, but are you actually doing, is the nature appropriate, nature of the use and all that appropriate, are you transforming it, but are you also citing your sources? So you saw with Lexi's Cloudstone, I think she made it pretty clear that the images she got and things were all from that book. She's not trying to sell them and redistribute them in any way, so that takes care of the copyright and fair use question, and then she also cited it because she made it very clear that she was doing a report on iFunny. Now that's going to look a little bit different depending on if you're working with middle school kids or high school kids, but I think that's definitely something to consider. Someone else asked a question about acceptable use policies, and I want to point out another great resource, and let me see if I can find it. It's from COSN, which is I think like the consortium of school networks or something like that, school networking. I probably got it wrong. But they have, oh, here it is, called it. So it's a Rethinking Acceptable Use Policies to Enable Digital Learning, a guide for school districts. So I am copying and pasting that link in there. They just updated this, I think, within the last year or so. It hadn't been out for a while yet, but it was revised in March 2013. And I think it's a really useful tool. You read through it and you think about how they're trying to balance the needs of security and safety, network security and safety for children, with the needs of participating in a mobile and increasingly networked world. And they've got some really good tips and thoughts and suggestions. If you're ever looking for examples of acceptable use policies, I know obviously if you're tuned into this webinar, you're connected to a PLN. That's who I'd turn back to and say, hey, can you give me an example of your AUP and I'm sure that you'll find people are willing to share those. In terms of specific questions about the AUP, I can't quite remember who typed or who asked that, or I guess you typed it on a slide, so I wouldn't know anyway. But if I can answer any other question like that, I'll try to do so. Other questions or thoughts? I'm clicking back in the slideshow now to see what else was in there. We talked a little bit about copyright, plagiarism. Here is another great tool, especially for written text and not necessarily multimedia text, although you can use it for multimedia as well. And that tool is SiteWriter. And I will do the full disclosure thing. I'm on their educational board. I'm not quite sure, I can't remember the official name of the board, Educational Advisory Board. They don't pay me, but I do kind of work as their one of their education evangelists, so just so you know that. But SiteWriter is a useful tool. It helps gather bibliographic information, and then it also, just recently, they released what had previously been pro types of features. They released them for everyone, which includes a tool for helping organize your essays and bringing in your content, and it's literally on screen. You drag your content in there and you can organize it. You can drag in your sources. Then the cool part is that you can export not only to Word but also to Google Docs. And their Pro version features a lot more teacher tools. It has access to databases and things like that, but the basic tool for SiteWriter is really powerful. Also, I know that EasyBib now has a plugin for Google Docs as an add-on, so you can use EasyBib right within the Google Docs interface as well. And one of the little-known features of Google Docs is that you can actually do the research with Google right in Google Docs. So helping students make that move and thinking about, where do I get my information from? How do I introduce it is really important. And a book that I rely on as a college writing instructor, but I also know many high school teachers are using it now, and I think that they might be coming out with like a middle and high school version, is a book called They Say, I Say. And they talk about these ideas of sentence templates or sentence frames, and they the idea of that is trying to help writers understand what the moves are in academic writing. So how do we introduce a quote? How do we transition from one idea to a competing idea? So I'll just type in the title of the book. It's called They Say, I Say. I would really encourage that too. All right, well, believe it or not, wow, we're coming in close to the top of the hour again. I know there are other sessions that people are going to try to click into. There's my contact information again. I'm going to pause for just a second. Peggy, any questions that you might have or anything that's coming up in the chat room that I've missed? All right, I'm still trying to practice my really good wait time, but I'll turn my video off here so we can wind down the bandwidth. And yes, it is. It's a great title for the book. And I think with that, unless there are any other questions here, and I'm not really seeing anything pop up on the chat room. Okay. Well, thank you, Miriam, and thank you, everyone, for being a part of the session. You certainly have my email and my Twitter ID right there. Feel free to contact me, and enjoy the rest of the virtual conference. So thank you very much, and enjoy.